Hello everyone, I am Ojasvi Sharma, a semester 4 student at the Institute of Law, Nirma University, Ahmedabad, and I will be having a short introductory talk on the topic international environmental law and the role of the Jus Cogens norms that are the peremptory norms recognized by the international community. Now, let's understand. We know the very fact that international environmental law and the Jus Cogens norms are no way interconnected to each other in the present day scenario, and why, as the question arises as to why I'm trying to relate these two. Now let's understand wherein the environmental law completely focuses on the global environmental law issues such as climate change, etc. The use cogens norms are the certain 5 to 6 recognized principles or the norms wherein there is no derogation or the violation of such norms is permitted under international law. Now let's bifurcate as to what is international environmental law and what are these use cogens norms and why they might that why environment might attain the nature of being a use cogens or a use cogens norms or a peremptory norm. The international environmental law that comes under the aspect of public international law, wherein these are the laws that govern the relation between nations and states and the relation between the nations and the international organizations such as United Nations and World Trade Organization. So the if we go environment specific, the laws that govern the environmental protection, if we consider them, the if we go about the background of the history of environment at the international scenario, uh, historically the environment was recognized to be a very important aspect that we need to take into consideration. For example, in the Judeo-Christian history or the Judeo-Christian tradition, environment was environment was mentioned a very important aspect, wherein the earth is a gift from God and we need to protect it for the for the development of the future generation. Now, not going to the historical aspect, as to now we come to the 1970s and 80s, wherein the international community or the member states of the United Nations came together to form to form a declaration, what we call as the Stockholm Declaration of the 1972, and this came into picture, wherein there were several laws and norms or the principles that we can call were recognized and were given such importance to the environment for the protection of natural resources, for the protection of biodiversity, as we know, because they are limited in number and we need to protect them. Then came the 1990s. In the 1992, they came the Rio Declaration, as we call it. The Rio Declaration came into the picture, which very much forms a part of customary international law, wherein the four major documents that came with that relates to the sustainable development, that relates to the climate change, and these were these were majorly accepted by all the member states, and the Rio Declaration came. The Rio Declaration that was accepted by various countries, and then the development and legal instrument, various environmental legal instruments came into picture, and the development of environmental law kept going on. And in the 21st century, in the year 2012, which was the 20th anniversary of the Rio Declaration, the same principles were reaffirmed, and the same principles were recognized, that they form a very integral part of international law, and they are of such utmost importance. Now, apart from this background or history of environmental law, as to we need to understand that various organizations have also recognized the importance of environment. Now, United Nations itself, in the Article 1 and Article 55 and 56, talks about international economic cooperation and social cooperation that is necessary for the international community and peaceful well-being of the international community. Also, we need to take into consideration that the human rights, trade, and national security also form or also are connected to international environmental law, because they both are complement they all are complementary to each other, because for the they are necessary to each other. And also various conferences, apart from this conventions or the treaties or the multilateral agreements that we call, there are several other, like for example in the United Nations Convention on the Law of Seas, article 192 talks about the protection of the marine environment also at the in the sea. So various as the evolution of the international law went on, then the evolution of international environmental law also came into picture, and thereby we need to also take into consideration as to why environment is important, and the protection of biodiversity is important, right? So there and also there was a program by the United Nations itself, that was UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, that was environment specific in that came into picture in Nairobi, Kenya, wherein they also reaffirmed the recognized principles of the international environmental law. Now the question that, apart from now going to the next aspect that I talked about, are the use cogens norms. Now, the question that arises as to how and why I am trying to relate this environmental law or the global environmental issues to the use cogens norms, wherein they are no way related to each other in the present day scenario. Now, let's understand the very fact that I accept the fact that there is no existing literature, or there is no existing any such reports with regards to use cogens norms being related to environment. But let's understand what are the use cogens norms. Use cogens norms, or the compelling norms as we call it, the literal meaning being compelling, these are the laws that are of such high stature, that are of such high value, that we call them super customary law, because they are the universally recognized principles. Going to the background or history of the use cogens norms, in the early 19th centuries, various scholars recognized the use cogens norms being the universally recognized principles, and they are of such higher importance or the higher value that any state or individual cannot go in derogation with these laws. For example, crime against humanity, the laws that are against genocide, uh, slavery, apartheid, these are several recognized universally recognized principles, wherein the violation of these norms is not at all permissible at the international level. So these use cogens norms, they then came into the scenario wherein they were at the, if we go hierarchically, they were at the top level. They were at the top of each and every source of law, because they had such higher value that we need to take into consideration. And also various tribunals and the courts recognize these principles, as the PCIJ recognized it in the Pablo Najera case, in the Oscar Chen case, and International Court of Justice in the genocide case of 1993. So uh, since these are of so utmost importance, these form a part of the universally recognized principles. Now, legally, these principles are recognized under the Vienna Convention and the Law of Treaties, under Article 53, which talks about these peremptory norms, and also the Article 64 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties talks about the addition of any such new peremptory norm that might attain such universal nature, and that might come into picture at the international level, and it is open to addition. These norms are open to addition. Now let's understand as to in the present day scenario, now why I'm trying to relate environment to these use cogens norms, because of the very fact that we know the mankind have been always exploiting these natural resources, have always exploited the biodiversity. Now since this exploitation cannot go on and on and on, because we know the fact that it is very, the environment is, and the resources are limited in number, and optimum utilization is necessary, the sustainable utilization is necessary, right? Now the sustainable development, why it is important. uh, Sustainable development means that the development that is not only for the present generation, but that also recognizes the needs, and that also recognizes the needs of the future coming generation. Now the development that is for the present and also that is for the future is necessary, and this sustainable development that will actually make sure that the resources are not exploited in such manner wherein wherein there are no resources available for the future coming generation. Thereby, it is important for us to protect the environment. It is important for us, wherein countries, wherein the nations come together to make to reaffirm, uh, to actually discuss to actually discuss this the importance of environment at the international scenario. We all know the very fact that the ozone layer has been depleting for because of the environmental harm, because of the exploitation that the mankind is doing. Thereby, the importance aspect that we need to take into consideration, and thereby I am saying that there might come a time wherein such laws or the principles of environment might attain the nature of being a peremptory norm, because they are because they might, because we know the fact that Jus Cogens norms are unanimous in nature. They are universally accepted. So the countries have to urge each other, the nations have to come forward and urge all the states as for to follow the environmental laws, to follow such to follow any such obligations at the international level to protect environment. And since they might become universally recognized principles and attain the nature of being a Jus Cogens norms, this is a far-fetched thing, I would say, because I know it is not possible for each and every country to compromise with the natural resources. To any such developing country, I'd say, to compromise to compromise for the utilization of these resources, because they also need to develop, right? So there might, because for this being this environment being of such utmost importance, they might attain such nature. So let's hope it does. So it was just a short introduction to environment and these viscogence norms. So please go and read about it, and you might find it helpful. Thank you so much.